I am in my process of becoming, being, and becoming to become the best version of myself, to reach the highest and truest expression of my soul, to climb the spiritual pyramid and be at the top, above worldly limitations of the heart and mind, to be unlimited, to be fully what it is meant to be, all in the context of African spirituality. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Process of Becoming podcast. I am Sibohle Boy, and thank you so much for tuning in. Just want to first extend my sincere gratitude for our community that is growing on all platforms, on both Spotify and on YouTube. And also on Spotify, we actually reached a milestone of 100 on 100 plays on Spotify, which is something that was incredible to see. Very much unexpected, but it's something that was incredible to see. That the community is growing and this community is so warm. I see all your comments, I see your likes, I see your private DMs, and I do appreciate you engaging. And I highly recommend that you share this channel so that it grows more. And I highly encourage engagement on the comment section on both on Spotify and on YouTube. So before I start, I want to start reading our comments. Maybe I won't share. I'll decide if I'm sharing or not on the names, just so that it encourages more because I do love to hear from you. So I'll be just reading a few comments from episode 2, which was Out of the Cocoon. And the first comment was on Spotify, and it is from Ikuku the Treasure. And it says that, to be honest, I was triggered by this episode. This episode was just a reminder that things happen during our spiritual journey, but we must always bounce back better and have trust in the process. I have been going through the most and I had shut down. I'm slowly emerging from that terrible doldrums. We are standing on business. Thank you so much, Igugu, for sharing. Yeah, I think also on my side, that specific episode was so difficult for me to share. And it's so true that we do tend to shut down when the going gets tough. But the most important thing is for us to still remain in our spiritual power and for us to still hold on to our vulnerability and not shut down, so that we can grow through it and not just only going through it. And I'm so glad to hear that you understand the mandate of 2025 African spiritual calendar, which is to stand on business. Yeah, and then the next comment, these are the ones from YouTube, and it just says we are learning. The other one just says, this episode is so personal. I won't lie, it hits home. Mental strength is my highlight because we really need to stand. Thank you for sharing. It feels like you're sharing on behalf of some of us. Thank you so much for sharing. I think it's so incredible, and it also attests to the importance of community because whenever we go through things, we our egos tend to personalize our problems and we think that we're the only people going through it until someone else says so, and you start to resonate and seeing that we're not alone on this journey. And I guess that's also part of why I created this platform, and especially for our spiritual journeys, because there's not a lot of platforms that speak on African spirituality. So it's just creating this platform where we're all just, learning and growing and holding each other's hands while we're going through our processes of becoming. Um, yeah, and then okay, this is like the last comment that I'll be reading, and it just says, takeaway: on the other side of adversity, there's a better view waiting to emerge, and therefore we shouldn't shy away or going back to the cocoon from tough times. Also finds gratitude in uncomfortable um situations. Senzima. And then it continues and says, sharing and being vulnerable can be so hard, and I can tell how emotional this episode was for you. Love and light. Thank you. And then it just ends off by saying, For the upcoming episodes, I would love to hear you touch on how you stay grounded and rooted in who you are and how you continue to embrace your authentic spirituality in the day of social media pressures and spiritual confusion. How is that going for you as you become the best version of yourself? Hmm. Well, thank you so much for that comment. I'm also so glad that you've also resonated for from this episode, which was so difficult for me to share because I was just highly vulnerable. Um, yeah, and it's just amazing what happens on the other side of vulnerability, which is the human connection, is the fact that people are then able to resonate with you. And yeah, I appreciate also the suggestion. And yeah, if there are any other questions or other topics that you'd like for us to touch on, then please do add them on the comments and then I'll just have a look at them. But I will touch on this question on the next coming episodes. And so we'll dive into this episode, which will be titled Surrendering to Divine Timing. Because the concept of divine timing has been resonating with me for the past few weeks. And I've just been sitting with it and just allowing it to seep deeply in my soul. And um, it's Jacaranda season in Johannesburg. Parts of Johannesburg are purple. The jacarandas are in full bloom and it is beautiful. And I've had the privilege of being able to take a few minutes just to take in the beauty and just take in this burst of color that is happening. And it made me realize the fact that just 2 months ago the trees were dull and it was winter, right? And and now we are in full bloom. Yeah, it made me also tie it in on the lessons that nature continues to teach us, how nature just flows um, with the different phases of life, learning through the different seasons, and the fact that it was winter just now and the trees were dull, and now it is spring and we are enjoying the burst of color. And the fact that you've got rain and it starts when it starts raining and it starts pouring, we don't panic during that time because we understand that there's going to be sunshine, right? And the fact that each phase serves its own purpose, right? There was still beauty in nature 2 months ago before the jacarandas were in full bloom. And I still appreciated the colors, the orange colors, the dull colors, the brown colors that were calming, right? And now I'm appreciating the bright colors that are energizing. And each of these seasons serving their own purpose. And we can never forget the context of African spirituality, which is the foundation of this podcast. Whenever we speak about divine timing, right? And so, on the African spiritual sense, divine timing is the knowing, because we don't believe we are knowers. So, it's the knowing that everything comes to me at the right time, in the right moment, in accordance to the direction of the spiritual dimension. And it's orchestrated by the spiritual dimension. For us to even dive deeper into the spiritual dimension, you remember that from episode 3, when I spoke about the context of African spirituality, we said that we're spirit coming from the spiritual world. So we're spirit beings. But just because I'm a spirit, it doesn't mean that I'm spiritual. For me to be spiritual, it means that I need to activate my spirit. And I activate my spirit by doing spiritual practices. So that would be communication with myself, with my spirit, through prayer, through affirmation, communicating with the spirits around me, and that would be my ancestors, that would be other people, and that would be the great deity, and that would be the creator. So, lighting spiritual candles, lighting spiritual sticks, or pasha, or prayer, and then just doing practices, cleansing, like different practices. So that is then what activates our spirit, or that's what activates our spirit for us to become spiritual beings and for us to be in alignment with the divine timing. Because the moment we speak of the divine timing and the divine, then we're speaking of being spiritual, right? And also on just on divine timing and the fact that in the African spiritual sense, like true reality is the spiritual dimension. It's the unseen. Everything starts in the spiritual dimension and then it manifests itself into the physical, right? Which means that the two worlds which means that the spiritual world is ahead of the physical world, and which means that our world is behind, right? And so, once we've activated our spirits, then our spirits start to take over our lives, and because we are spiritual beings that are coming from the spiritual world, then it means that once our spirits are spiritual, because we're doing spiritual practices, then our spirits become ahead while we're in the physical world. And then, which also then starts to have a disconnect, right, between these two worlds, a disconnect between our desires, where we want to be, where our spirit wants us to be, and between where we are right now, our current reality. And so, once there's that disconnect between where I want to be and where my spirit wants me to be and where I currently am, then that causes discomfort. And it also causes misalignment, right? Which then takes us to the second part of our topic, which is the surrendering, right? Because where there's misalignment and where we are disconnected, we are faced with either connecting with our spiritual self and connecting more with the spiritual world so that it may align us with the desires while we're still in high spirits and high vibration with it, or we start to lean more to our physical self, of which is our brain, which starts to panic, which starts to question and starts to want quick solutions, because we need to close this gap between my desires and where I want to be and what my current reality is presenting to me, right? And when we choose to connect, we choose to surrender. And when we when we speak about surrendering, we speak about being molded. We speak about letting go, letting go of control, being reshaped, going with the flow, like nature, how nature allows itself to go through the seasons. Um, and nature is it's just it's just, right? And us as spiritual beings, but because we also have the brain, it becomes difficult for us to just, right? So to surrender is to flow like nature, going through the seasons, understanding that there's a time for me to shed in autumn, understanding there's a time for me to be completely um, dead in winter, understanding that there's a rebirth in spring, understanding that there's full bloom in summer, right? And nature is connected with the feminine energy, right? And of which the feminine energy is the one that flows, whereas the masculine is the one that exerts force and initiates. But with the feminine, it flows. It means that when we're surrendering, we're flowing, and that we're sitting with the discomfort, right? The discomfort of not being in alignment, the discomfort of where I want to be versus where I currently am, right? Um, Maybe reflect on the fact that surrendering, surrendering also requires us to sacrifice and to give up certain things on a conquest to align, right? Um, Removing all the noise around us and sitting in stillness and noise, noise in our heads and the noise from the people around us on social media. And when we surrender, we are required to sit in stillness. And in stillness, that's where the discomfort is more heightened. And in the discomfort, it's the discomfort of where we want to be versus where we currently are, and the discomfort of silencing our physical self that wants to take over, that wants the quick solutions, that is desperate for a quick fix because I need to get out of this. The discomfort is also what fuels us to move, and it's also what tells us that it's time for me to grow. It's how we also check that we need to, to level up, like in a sense. But we need to sit with the discomfort. And it's within the discomfort where we're able to hear our souls, right? Because remember what we said in the previous times that our souls know when it comes to our purpose, right? And once we activate our spiritual self, once we activate our spirituality, then our spiritual self starts being in control. And it's only through stillness do we hear our souls and where we hear the spiritual dimension, which is Izwe no more. Yeah. And I also reflected on the fact that it's so much easier for us to understand divine timing when we're in the phase of blessings. When we finally get what we've requested for from our guides, it's only then do we start to understand that I'm so grateful for what I just received and it arrived at the perfect time and I'm so grateful. And it's only then do we start to understand this concept of surrendering to divine timing. But it's like when we're in our waiting phase, when we're in the phase of requesting, of prayer, of upasha or speaking to your spirit guides, and waiting for what you asked for to materialize, that's when it's difficult because we're thinking to ourselves, when am I getting it? I need some sort of guarantee of when I'm getting it. And that's when we start to check that and also seeing other people getting what we requested for and what we prayed for. Or maybe like we're in that phase of sacrificing. That's when it's actually more difficult for us to understand the concept of surrendering to divine timing. Let's say at work, you've got high workloads, right? We're now approaching the Gregorian calendar's year end, which means that there are lots of deadlines, and we're in that phase. But it's difficult for us to understand the concept of surrendering to divine timing when we are under pressure, when we're in our phase of busyness, and we quickly just want this to end. And it's hard for us to accept the fact that I am now in my phase of sacrificing, right? It's difficult for us to understand the concept of divine timing when there's sickness involved, or you're taking care of a sick person or a sick member of the family. Um, it's hard for us to surrender because our brains need the quick fix. We need this guarantee that's going to say, when is this ending? And then suddenly we panic because I need a way out of this. Suddenly we in that low vibration of panic, of negative thoughts, of disappointment, right? So for example, like even when you're applying for a job and you get declined or you're not receiving the feedback because you want a job, you're in between. I've requested for a job, I've applied, and now I'm in the wait. We start being, we need a way out of this. I need a guarantee that I'm gonna get that call back. And actually, that's when it matters most. That's when the concept of divine timing matters most. Not when we are blessed and we're in our highs and suddenly we're like, my guides are great. The creator is amazing. I understand why I needed to receive what I received. But it's like, what about when we're in the waiting? Do we understand the concept of divine timing and do we surrender while we're in the wait, and understanding that each phase in our lives serves its own purpose, right? And all of it has been designed for our spiritual growth. And instead of approaching where we are, the season that we're in, from our physical experience, which is an experience of lack, an experience of want, an experience of I want, I lack, I'm not seeing. Instead of us looking at it from our physical experience, but instead to look at it from our spiritual experience, which is, what is this teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from this? Because our spiritual selves is understands that our journeys are designed for our spiritual growth, which means that each phase serves its purpose. The phase of busyness and deadlines. What is this teaching me? What am I supposed to learn from this? The phase of rejection, the phase of the weight, the phase of depression. What is this teaching me? And when we surrender, like, we're not saying that we're not finding solutions and that finding solutions is wrong. We're still finding solutions. Like, if I'm in the wait for a job, I'm still gonna call and double check what's the feedback. I'm still gonna apply because I want to move my current career. I'm trying to switch careers, right? I'm having deadlines. I'm still gonna find ways in which I can manage stress and manage time. But as we surrender, we we are in stillness and we eliminate the noise, which means that there's a sense of sacrifice involved as we surrender, a sacrifice for our spiritual selves, right? And as we surrender, there is an element of prayer or upahla and communicating with the spiritual guides using insebenzo or spiritual works, cleansings. So we're not just, when we are surrendering and we're in stillness, it doesn't mean that we're in the couch lying and we're saying, oh, I'm just surrendering, right? It's like we're still doing works that will allow to speed up the process and to speed up and to protect what we're supposed to be receiving, right? When we surrender, we're still nourishing our minds with positive thoughts, positive affirmations, with meditation to maintain our high vibration and our high spirits. Because so that when we do receive what we requested for, and when we do get out of our phase of low, it we grow through it instead of going through it. And by the time you receive the blessing, you are traumatized. You actually don't even want what you prayed for because of what you went through to receive it, right? But instead, to look at the experience on what it taught you, which allows you to even find pockets of gratitude. Because as we surrender, we also find gratitude because in stillness, it is quiet. And in quiet, we're able to notice more, whether it's gratitude of sunlight, of sunshine, it's gratitude of seeing a rainbow, it's gratitude of a certain conversation that you had, it's gratitude of I'm depressed, but I laughed in this specific moment. And I'm grateful for just that laughter and sharing that laughter, right? Then when we surrender and we understand what surrendering means, that surrendering is not us being on a couch and lying in and just, or being passive and just saying, oh, I'm just surrendering to the process. But like being surrendering is us being in stillness. Surrendering is us still being doing practices that activate our spiritual selves, which is upahla, which is using insebenzo spiritual works, ensuring that we are cleansing ourselves, um, nourishing our minds with positivity, prayer, meditation, and then also just finding gratitude within, right? Then when we do that, we start to grow through the phases and we start to actually align ourselves with the blessings so that when the blessings arrive, we are shaped and molded into the people that we were supposed to be in order to handle whatever blessing we were supposed to have, right? And be able to take care of it and appreciating it more. Um, Yeah, I think this whole reflection, like it made me appreciate the beauty of African spirituality. And it made me so grateful. Like it made me just reflect on the fact that, like, and I always say this, like to be an African in Africa, practicing indigenous African spirituality in my youth, we truly are our ancestors' wildest dreams, our ancestors whose path was demonized, our ancestors who were killed just by embracing who they are and their divine way, right? And here we are, right? Here we are in a religiously dominated world where we've got religious bullies that will come to an African indigenous platform and tell us to find Jesus, right? But here we are being authentically ourselves and being unapologetically um, ourselves in our youth. For me, that is the dream. That is the dream. Yeah, guys. I think that's where we'll end off for this episode. That's where we'll end off on when it comes to surrendering to divine timing. I think, yeah, to conclude it, we're in phases, and the most important thing is us protecting our energies through the phases, right? Goes back to out of the cocoon. We need to step out of that cocoon. And once we're out of the cocoon, then we start having different phases. And in the phases, whenever we experience the lows, we want to go back to the cocoon and we need to drag ourselves out. But while we're out of the cocoon, we still need to thrive through surrendering and flowing and allowing our different phases to shape us, right? Whether we're waiting for that new job, waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for um new car, new house, you know, all of that, we surrender and we go through the phases. And when we surrender, it's us also knowing that I don't have the answers yet. And I don't need to have the answers yet. But I know it's going to happen. I don't know how, but I know it's going to happen because I'm actively doing practices that are opening the path for what I need to happen. I am depressed, but I know that I will get out of this phase. I don't know how, but I'm also doing practices that will attract the attention of the spiritual world so that they can assist me to get out of this phase. I don't know how, but I'm flowing through this phase so that by the time that the blessing comes, I'm still thriving. I'm still myself. I did not lose myself through my winter, right? Yeah. Okay, guys, so that's where we'll stop. I do encourage, as I mentioned, engagement. So please do let me know, what phase are you in and what are you learning from the different phases in your life? Like, what have you picked up? And how does the concept of surrendering to divine timing, how does that resonate with you? What have you picked up on your own journey when it comes to that surrendering? How do you surrender to your blessings in your phase of receiving blessings? And how do you surrender in your phase of waiting? How do you thrive while you're still waiting for the blessing? Thank you so much for listening. Yeah, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye.